The boardroom, the field, the leadership table. To most, it's just the office. To me, it's the arena. Welcome to In the Arena with Stephanie, the briefing room for high-achieving Christian women navigating the complexities of male-dominated industries. I'm your host, Stephanie Brown, CEO of Her Authenticity, leadership coach, and master Christian life coach. You aren't in these spaces by accident. You are there on assignment. I believe that when you lead with biblical excellence, success is the inevitable overflow. Through this podcast, we're reclaiming your kingdom authority and expanding your corporate influence, equipping you to lead as the authentic ambassador you were created to be. Let's step into the arena. Welcome back to In the Arena with Stephanie. I'm going to go ahead and jump right in today because I have a subject that I think many of you either are experiencing right now or you have experienced it in your past. Have you ever had your identity stolen? This hasn't happened to me, but for others, they've told me that they felt violated, vulnerable. Some were angry, some felt helpless, some even felt ashamed, and the list of emotions goes on and on. Well, we are going to talk about identity theft today, but not from the standpoint of someone taking your finances or your name, etc. Let me ask you another question. Have you ever experienced, or maybe you're currently experiencing, identity theft in the arena? Let me paint a picture for you before you answer that question. This is the identity roller coaster that no one warns you about. When you joined the arena, you joined with experience, perspective, and you were ready to create results. You understood how decisions got made. You understood that it wasn't about politics, but it was about how they conducted business. You were a little apprehensive, but at the same time, you were excited. You weren't unsure, but you still held back just a little bit. You spoke with intention and you added value. And for a while, this particular strategy worked for you. It worked until your ideas stopped landing. So, what did you do? You shifted, you adjusted, you became more direct, more explicit, you became strong. And not just strong, you were a lot. You became decisive, but not just decisive. Some said that you were difficult. So, what did you do? You shifted because you got tired of the labels. So, you started to say less. You chose your moments. And before you even realized it, you were holding back again. That's the ride. That's the identity roller coaster ride. And on this ride, you learn that it could cost you when you showed up in your God given identity. So let's dive in and let's talk about this a little bit further and a little bit deeper. We've been talking about identity, but I want to go further today. Here's the truth that most people won't say. They won't say that identity theft in the arena is rarely violent. They won't say that because it's voluntary. And your identity in the arena isn't stolen, even though many women believe that it is. It's not stolen, it's voluntarily handed over, small decisions after small decisions. And what I mean by that, it happens in small decision makings. It happens the moment when you choose to filter your tone or filter your thoughts and your instincts, when you're holding back what God gave you to say. It's when you are showing up in the arena as a version of yourself that you think feels acceptable to the room. But what happens over time is that your authentic voice is no longer leading, but instead your survival strategy is in motion. As ambassadors, we are supposed to operate differently. I've said this before in my other podcasts, and I'm going to say it again today because I want you to understand this point. As ambassadors, we represent the kingdom, not the environment. This past weekend was Easter weekend, and like many of you, I reflected back on the life of Christ, his ministry, his death, his burial, his resurrection. And when you look at Jesus, when he was doing his ministry, he was in a lot of different environments, but he never changed who he was in those environments. They accused him of different things. They talked about him, but every time that he showed up to an environment, he was who he said that he was. But for us, somewhere along the way, we forget who it is that we represent. You see, we let the environment define how much of us shows up. We let the environment define how we communicate. We let the environment define what's acceptable. But your identity was never meant to be negotiated, right? We're not supposed to negotiate our identity. We're not negotiating who we want to be. Our identity comes from Jesus Christ and Him alone. Do you remember Daniel? Daniel in the lion's den. We probably heard that story many times when we were kids, but it was such an impactful story as it relates to Daniel and his identity. Daniel in the lion's den, it was a foreign environment for him. It was a different culture. And him choosing not to obey resulted in real consequences. Daniel didn't adjust to be safe. He didn't adjust his identity to stay safe. He didn't filter his devotions or hide who he was in his practices. But Daniel stayed consistent. And as ambassadors of Christ, we too are to stay consistent in our identity. Because Daniel stayed consistent in being who he was and doing what ambassadors of Christ do, representing him, not only did he survive, but he also influenced the environment that he was in. And when we shift our mindset from surviving in the arena to representing in the arena, not only are we going to survive and be successful, but we're also going to have an impact and influence the various arenas that we are in. So, how do you reclaim your identity in the arena? Three things I'm going to give you. I like to give you some things. So I'm going to give you three things today. First, I want you to stop letting others define your path. One leader does not define your ceiling, and one organization does not write your story. They can't. And the reason they can't is because God placed you there. So they don't know your full story. They don't know what the ceiling is for your life because they didn't orchestrate it and they didn't write it. Number two, I want you to stop believing every label that you hear. Just because something is spoken, it does not mean that it is true. There are some labels that are intentional. There are some labels are just someone's limited perspective. But we don't have to believe them. So stop believing the labels. In other words, stop believing the lies. And then number 3, I want you to stop over filtering. And this is the one I really want you to hear. The more you filter, the less visible you become. In my book, The Balance Myth, God's Woman in a Male-Dominated Arena, I talk about a time in my life when I felt invisible and didn't even realize it. And there was a pivotal moment when I shifted and I chose no longer to believe that. So if you haven't picked that playbook up, the link is in the show notes and you can grab your copy. But the more you filter, the less visible you become. And then you get evaluated based on the shrunken version of yourself. Your authentic voice gets buried under the survival strategy. Let me tell you what I learned when I was on this roller coaster. There was a time I was overlooked for opportunities that I was qualified for. I can remember a leader even telling me directly, "You'll never obtain that position." I could have let that statement and those words from her crush me, but I didn't. I had a choice. I could accept what she told me, or I could reevaluate who I was becoming. Guess which one I chose? I chose to reevaluate and to look at who I was becoming in the arena. I did something different. I sought perspective. I even leaned into some of my trusted relationships. One being a male mentor that I had reverse mentored. And then I just stopped asking how I could fit into their path. And instead, I started building a path for myself that was aligned with who God had actually made me to be. See, when you stop asking, how can you fit in their path? Because that's exhausting. And you start building the path that is aligned for who God created you to be, it's a game changer. It's going to shift everything for you in the arena. So, identity theft in the arena isn't about someone taking something from you. It's about what you slowly give away, and that's your identity. No one steals an ambassador's identity. You surrender it. Now, again, I know that there will always be pressure in the arena. You'll always have expectations. But here's the question, and this is an important question, one that I want you to answer this week. I want you to work on this week. What are you no longer willing to trade for acceptance? Or what are you no longer willing to trade for your voice or your edge or your conviction? I want you to pick one and I want you to draw the line this week. You see, every leader has a moment where they stop negotiating who they are. They stop selling out. And this is your moment. So that's all for today's podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss next Thursday's episode. I also want to remind you to get your copy of my new playbook, The Balance Myth. The link is in the show notes. You must use the link that is in the show notes. It's currently not on Amazon. And finally, Make sure you share this episode with another woman who has lost her identity in the arena. I'll see you in the next episode. Remember, kingdom authority and corporate influence is yours.